Hello everyone and welcome back to the Neo4j series. In the previous video, we learned how to connect Python to a Neo4j graph database using the Neo4j Python driver. We created a driver, we verified the connection and executed our first cipher query from Python. So in this video, what we are going to do, we are going to move one step further. Instead of simply running a test query, we are going to perform actual database operation. Specifically, we are going to implement the four fundamental CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. And while doing that, we are going to understand two very important concepts in the Neo4j Python driver: sessions and transactions. So the main goal is that by the end of this video, you will understand how Python application interacts with the Neo4j in a much more realistic way. So let's start and let's look into the code first. So first, what we have done here is that we have imported the graph database from Neo4j. So from Neo4j import graph database. In the next step, we have defined the variables. We have defined the URI, which basically shows the location of the location where our database server is running. Then we have the auth, which shows the username and password to access that particular database. And then we have the database name, which is being stored inside the variable database. And the name of the database is Neo4j. Now, next is that we have defined the different methods for create, get, update, and delete operations. And then we have called them using the main functions. And eventually we are calling the main function. It's a very simple, straightforward code. Now, first let's look into the uh, create person or create operation. So let me click on this one. So what we have done here is, if you look at this particular method, so there are three parameters here. Okay, we have defined, which is tx, name, and age. So tx is one of the most interesting parameter, I would say, which it represents the current Neo4j transactions. I will get into the detail of the transactions in the later part of the video. So let's just understand. First, we have defined the query. So inside the query, you see there is a keyword which I've used is the create. So the create tells Neo4j that we want to create something. And then you have the p colon person. So p colon person here means that we are creating a node with the label person. And then we have defined the two properties of that particular person, which is the name and the age. And instead of providing the actual values inside this, we have used the parameter, the concept of parameters. So we are using dollar name and dollar age. So if you are using the dollar name, dollar age, which means that they are defined as the parameters. So this is a very much important practice. When you're defining methods, define the parameters instead of using the actual values. And then if you see here, we have the return statement. Sorry, before that we have the result. So here we are using the transactions variable tx.run. We are passing the query parameter, and then we have put the name and age parameters here accordingly. And after that we have the return statement. So return statement is showing result.single, which means the single method here tells the driver that we expect a single record from this query. So this is the kind of a notification to driver to don't to not to expect more than one record. So it's going to give us always a single record. That's why that is the use of this particular single method. Now let's look at the read operation. So read operation is basically get people. So here our function is named as get people. We are using the tx, which is basically the transaction, as the parameter. We have defined the query. So you can see here match keyword. So basically when we use the keyword match p colon person, so it's going to look for the nodes having the person label. And then here we're returning the name and the age accordingly. And here the results are going to be ordered by the name in the alphabetical way. Then we have the result. Similar fashion, we have defined the result is equal to tx.run, and we are passing the query as the parameter. And the return, we are returning the records. Okay, so there can be a multiple records. So it's going to look into for all the person labels, all the values which nodes which are with the person label, and it's going to return that. So that's why our return statement is a kind of a Python list. It's returning a kind of a Python list. Now the next thing is about the update operations. So similar fashion, we have used the update person age. So by the name of the function, you can understand that okay, we are updating the age of that particular person. So we have passed three parameters: tx, name, and new age. Okay. Similar way, we have used the match keyword inside the query. Then we have used the set keyword. So set keyword, what it's doing is it's just setting the new value for that particular person, which we want to change the name. Which, sorry, not the name here. We are changing the age here. Okay, and then we are returning the name and age of that particular person. Okay, and in the result, we are using the tx.run. We are passing the query as the parameter name and the new age, uh, which is being set. Similarly, single method is used to tell the driver that we are going to get a single result. So after doing the update operation, the last operation of the CRUD is the delete operation. Okay, so we are deleting basically what we are doing here is we are deleting the person which we have created. So again, it's going to we are use the match. Uh, so match keyword is going to search for that particular person. Then we have used detach delete. So please try to understand detach delete, which is being used to delete the node. But the word detach is very much important. So if the node has relationship connected to it, okay, so detached delete also removes the relationship. So when you look at a graph, okay, there the nodes are interconnected with each other, which means they have some relation with some other thing. Let's say employee node is there or person node is there. He works for a company, so has is working with that company. Okay, so it's a relationship between them. So if you want to delete that particular person, so then we have to also delete the company where he's working, right? So if we use the detach keyword, it's going to remove the relationship also with the node. Okay, so without detach node Neo4j will not allow you to delete a node that still has a relationship. Please remember this. So in our simple example, let's say if I have created a record named Alice and it doesn't have a relationship, so even if it's used a simple delete, it's going to work. But if the person which I've created has some relationship, okay, and if we are and we are using the detached delete, we are using only simple delete, then it's not going to delete that particular node. Okay, so it's always good that when you're working with the real graph data, please use the detached delete. Okay, and then finally we are returning the result dot single, which is basically we are also counting it, the deleted count, how many records are being deleted. Okay, and then we are using the result tx.run, passing the query and the name, and then we are returning the single record which is being created. Okay, so this is how we have defined the methods for all of them, for the create, for the read, for update, and for delete. Now, the next thing is like how we can use all these four methods. So we are using the main function here. So if you look at the main function, so you are familiar with the first part of the code, this part of the code, because which we have already seen in our first video when we were talking about the Python drivers. So we have created the driver here using the graph database dot driver, and we are passing the URI and the authorization variable, which contains the username and the password, and we have used a Python with statement. So this ensures that the driver is properly managed and closed when our program finishes. And then we call the driver dot verify connectivity. Okay, which to check that Python can that there is the connection is being established between the driver and the database, and it ensures that the Python can communicate with the Neo4j. So if everything is working fine, we are printing here connected successfully. Now we come to the most important concept of this particular video, uh, which is sessions. Okay, so in the next part, if you see here, let's say if we talk about any one of them, when we talk about create, we can talk about read, update, or delete. Okay, so we have defined something called as driver.session. Okay, so driver.session bracket database is equal to database. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, so this is how we create a session. This code tells us that this is how we create a session. So think of a session as a context in which we are going to interact with the Neo4j database. So the driver manages the underlying connection, while the session provides the context for executing database work. So basically, session is telling us that what kind of work, what kind of operations we are performing on that particular database. Okay, so as usual, we can think about something like we have the driver which set up the connection with the database using the Python driver. Then we have the session. So session is basically on the larger scale, which shows that in this session, these type of operations are being performed. And then we have the transaction. So basically, transaction is basically one unit of task which is being done. Okay, and then inside the transaction we have the cipher query. So in simple words, driver manages the communication with the Neo4j. The session is used to perform database work, and transaction provides the execution context for one or more database operation. And the cipher query describes what we want Neo4j to do. Okay, so this is how we are doing it. So if you look at the first one, the first part, create. Okay, so in this one, what we are doing is like we have a session.execute write method, and instead that we have called the method create person, which we created earlier, and we are passing the arguments, which is basically the value for that particular parameter. We are defining ls and 25. So we are telling the Neo4j here that execute the create person function as a write transaction. Okay, so we provided the create person as the transaction function here. Then we provided ls and 25 as the function argument inside it. And then the driver, okay, then the driver handles the transaction for us. If the transaction succeed, we receive the return record. And then we then print created. Okay, so that's what it is being doing here. Then if we similarly look at the read person, this part of code, so what it is doing here, so we have created another session and execute. Okay, session.execute read get people. Okay, notice that this time we are using the execute read. We are using the execute read method, this particular method. Okay, rather than execute write. So this tells the Neo4j driver that this operation is intended to read the data rather than modify the database. So that is the difference between execute read and execute write. Okay, so here we are not modifying anything in execute read. We are just reading the database. Okay, then we loop through the results for person in person people and print. Okay, the person name, person age, and the output here maybe look like the name of the person and the age. So let's say for example Saurav and 35, so like that kind of output it might look like. And then we have the update. So here inside the update, this part of code, what we are doing, we perform the update. Okay, so again we have created the session.execute right, and we are calling the update person. We are passing the age, we are passing the name and the age arguments, and we are using here execute right because we are changing the data, we are updating the data. So we are passing the person's name, alice. Here the alice is the person name and the new age. Okay, so earlier if you look at it, we have provided the age as 25 here. Okay, but now we want to change it to 30. That's what we are doing here in the update. Okay, and so what it's going to do, this part is like this query will find Alice and change her age from 25 to 30. And then we are going to print the return record. The output should look like something that name and age, okay, in the form of a dictionary. You see here, we are returning it as in form of a dictionary. So, and next the operation is the next is the delete person in the main function. So what we are again we are what we are doing here is like we want to execute. So it's a kind of an execute write function. So what we did here is like we are calling the delete person and Alice. We want to delete the person which we have created. Alice we have created, and then we are passing printing the deleted. So the record which is being deleted. Okay, and here so this is the very much important point. Now, if you have noticed here, so there are two things which here is like when we talk about the create, update, and delete, we are using the execute write method. If you look at this one, execute write method, and then we are in the read operation, we are using the execute read. Okay, so so let's pause and try to understand why we are using the different methods here. We are using execute read, and then we are using also execute write. So when we say execute read for operations that only retrieves information, that is not making any change to the database. For example, if we are using match p person return p, okay, we use execute write for operations that changes the database. Okay, for example, if you are using to if you want to do any kind of a create operation, if you want to do a kind of a delete operation, or if you want to do an update operation using the set keyword, so in that case what we are using the execute write method because it's changing. it is changing something in the database. So and the operations create, set, and delete changes something in the database rather than reading it. Okay, so when we only want to read, we use execute read, but when we want to write, we use execute write. So this distinction helps the Neo4j driver manage transaction execution appropriately. It also makes our application code much clearer, I would say, because we can immediately see whether an operation is intended to read or modify the graph. Now, another thing which is very much important is to understand the transactions. Okay, so transactions is basically, it represents a unit of work against a database. For example, when we execute create p person. So if you look at here, we have created the transaction inside all the methods: create person, get people, update person age, delete person. Okay, so we have passed this transaction, and with the help of the transaction, we are running the query. We are passing the query and we are running it. Okay, so so a transaction, as I said, is a kind of a unit of work against the database. So whenever we execute create, let's say if we execute something called as a create p person name this, okay, Neo4j executes that operation as a part of the transaction. Okay, if I use this run this query inside this transaction, it runs it as a part of transaction. If the transaction succeeds, the changes are committed. If something goes wrong, the transactions can be rolled back. So this is one of the fundamental concept of the database system. So Neo4j Python drivers, execute read or execute write APIs allows us to define the transaction functions without manually handling all the transactions lifecycle ourselves. So please remember, transaction is very much important question, important concept, and there's always a interview questions that what is the difference between transactions and sessions. So I would like you to explore more in detail uh, that what can be, I would say in a more vocal way, how you can explain the difference between transaction and sessions. Okay, so we can also think about like when we are working with the Neo4j using the Neo4j Python driver. Uh, we can think about the architecture as a there is a Python application, then we have the Neo4j Python driver in between, then the driver, then we have the sessions, then we have the transaction, and then we have the cipher query. Okay, and then in the end we have the database, and then the results travels back in the opposite direction. So the database provides a result, cipher query fetches it. Okay, it goes gives it back to the transaction, it gives it back to session, and it gives it back to the Python driver, and ultimately we see the results in the Python application. Okay, so what we are going to do now is we are going to run this particular code. Okay, so and we are going to check the results in our database. So we have defined all the methods, everything is here. So first we want to see only the create operation, create method. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this part, comment this particular part. Okay, I've commented this particular part, and now I'm going to see only the create. Okay, so I'm only calling the create method. So let me save this. If I don't save it, then the changes will not be reflected. Now I enter it. Let's wait. It takes some time sometimes to. Okay, so you see here, it's showing that the name Alice age is being created. Now what we are going to do, we are going to go back to the mm, go back to our Neo4j driver. Okay, so here if I click on the person, so you see here Alice is being created. Let me maximize it. You see Alice is being created here. Okay, so there are two Alice here because one I created it previously also, but I forgot to delete it. Okay, so Alice is being created. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to um, next step, I'm going to uncomment this part. I'm going to do the read operation also. Okay, so it's going to give me the results in the output. It's going to display the result. So see here, it's this output is coming from the create. It's created this much. Okay, let me run. Let me save it. I forgot to save it. Now again run it. Sometimes I forgot to save it, and then it shows the results of the previous part. Okay, so if you see here, there are these many ls which is being created. Okay, how many? One, two, three, four. Four ls are there. Two bobs are there. Okay, and this is how it's being created. Now what we are going to do, how many ls are it's being? One, two, three, four. Okay, And now it's showing how many here? One, two. Okay. Now if I click on this person again, so you see here, now we have four. One, two, three, four LS is being created here. Okay. So now what we are going to do, we are going to update. Okay. So now we are going to update it and we are going to run this code. And before running it, it's important to save it. So if I click on this one, so see here. Uh, so okay, now updated the list. So you see here, updated, it came the answer, updated list 30. Okay. Now we have to again click on this particular person to see that list age is being changed to 30. You see here, age is being changed to 30. Okay. So now the next step is to delete. So we have now how many LS? We have one, two, three, four, five. Okay. Five LS is there. So if I comment, uncomment this particular part, and if I run this code, now let me save it again. I do the same mistake again and again. Now I click on enter. Yes. So you see here, one of the account is being deleted. Okay. So now we have total how many? One, two, three, four, five, six. How many nodes are there? We had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Eight nodes were there. Okay. Now if I click it again, so you see here, Alice is being deleted. Now you can't see any Alice. The record with all the Alice, total there were five, all of them are being deleted here. Okay. So this is how it's always good that whatever operations which you are doing here, you can check it in the Neo4j browser, or if you're using the desktop app, you can use it there. So um, so this was all about in this video about the CRUD operations, how we can use the CRUD operations inside the Neo4j using the Python driver. We also talked about the session and transactions. So if you have any questions regarding this, regarding any part of the concept which you didn't understood, please write down in the comment section. And it's also important uh, to tell me in the comment section that which video you want to know to understand the concept, which concept you want to know. Then I will create the video out of it. And please do like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot for watching.